The Zambezi, swollen and bruised ochre from the recent deluge, roared below Kalonji Mwansa. Rain-slicked binoculars pressed hard against his brow, magnifying the horror unfolding in the churning currents. A young lion, barely more than a sub-adult, was caught in the river's vicious grip, its tawny fur slicked against a tangled snarl of plastic netting. Each frantic lunge was met with the river's brutal indifference, pulling it further downstream, closer to the treacherous rapids. His radio crackled, a flat, impersonal voice cutting through the wind. Zulu 7, confirm visual. Do not intervene. Observe, report. The words drilled into him over 2 decades as a ranger were as automatic as his own heartbeat. Nature's law, often cruel, demanded non-interference. It was the foundation of his work, the principle that protected the delicate balance of the wild. But this wasn't nature's law. This was human waste, a grotesque symbol of humanity's careless footprint, slowly dragging an innocent creature to its death. A visceral agony twisted in Kalonji's gut, battling the ironclad protocol that dictated his every action. The lion's struggle was a mirror, reflecting the relentless encroachment of man on the wild. Across the raging expanse, the Mwamba pride watched, a cluster of golden ghosts on the opposing bank. Their calls were not the aggressive challenges of a territorial dispute, but a trembling, almost mournful chorus that seemed to vibrate with shared grief. Kalonji had never witnessed anything like it, an unprecedented display of anguish from a pride, their powerful roars muted by palpable despair. Then the young lion's head disappeared beneath the foam, only to resurface seconds later with a raw, desperate cry that tore through Kalonji's practiced stoicism. The matriarch, a scarred queen whose reign spanned Kalonji's entire career, let out a single earth-shattering roar that shuddered across the canyon, a sound of pure, unadulterated anguish. In that moment, the rule of non-interference shattered. The conflict within him resolved into a singular, agonizing decision. He would intervene, no matter the cost. Without a second thought for the immediate danger or the inevitable disciplinary fallout that would surely follow, Kalonji sprinted to his land cruiser. He grabbed his inflatable boat, a heavy rubberized mass, and shoved it into the torrent, the violent currents instantly tugging at it like a hungry beast. The river was a chaotic maelstrom of brown water and debris, but his focus was singular, absolute. The paddle bit into the water, each stroke a defiant act against the river's might. As he finally reached the struggling animal, the lion's eyes, amber and glazed with exhaustion, flickered up at him. Kalonji pulled his knife, a dull gleam reflecting the overcast sky, and lunged forward, slashing at the thick plastic weave. The instant the blade bit, a jolt of raw instinct rippled through the lion. It flinched, a low growl rumbling in its chest, but no attack came. Instead, those weary eyes locked onto Kalonji's, devoid of aggression, filled only with a profound, ancient weariness that spoke of surrender. "Swim with me," Kalonji yelled, his voice hoarse above the roar of the Zambezi, pushing a paddle against the lion's flank. In an impossible display of intelligence, or perhaps sheer desperation, the lion lunged forward with sudden, renewed force, aligning its powerful strokes with the rhythm of Kalonji's paddle. Man and beast, for a fleeting, surreal moment, moved as one. Together they angled towards a narrow sandbar, a muddy haven amidst the raging currents. Along the bank, the Mwamba pride kept pace, their mournful calls now transformed into urgent, encouraging bellows that echoed their impossible hope. Finally, with a gasping lunge, the lion stumbled onto the sandbar, collapsing in a heap of dripping fur and raw muscle. It lay there heaving before slowly, miraculously, lifting its battered head. Its eyes found Kalonji's once more, and then, with a profound, unexpected gesture that brought a lump to Kalonji's throat, it slowly lowered its brow to the sand, a silent, solemn bow of gratitude. As Kalonji untangled the last shreds of the complex netting from the lion's fur, he examined it. This was no ordinary fishing net, no casual piece of discarded plastic. Its weave was too uniform, too deliberate, almost industrial. A subtle, almost mechanical imperfection caught his eye within the fibers, a tiny metallic glint that felt alien, out of place. This wasn't just human waste. This hinted at something far more organized, far more sinister. On the precarious, shrinking sandbar, the young lion lay panting, its breath ragged and shallow, a wet, rattling sound in the pre-dawn chill. Kalanji, soaked to the bone and shivering, his body protesting the river's brutal embrace, watched the Mwamba pride across the churning expanse. But their focus wasn't entirely on their injured kin. An unnerving, almost intelligent gaze was fixed on him. It was a collective scrutiny that sent a shiver down his spine, unrelated to the cold. Cautiously, Kalanji moved closer to the injured beast. The lion slowly lifted its head, its amber eyes, now clearer, locking onto his with a profound recognition that transcended mere animal instinct. It allowed him to work, to gently cut away the last stubborn strands of the complex netting that had dug deep into its flesh. As the final pieces came away, a grim discovery emerged. This was more than just crude plastic. Embedded in the deeper cuts were fragments that glinted faintly, metallic flecked, biodegradable polymer. It wasn't meant to suffocate quickly. It was designed to disintegrate slowly, causing prolonged, agonizing harm, a drawn-out death. Then, on the lion's flank, just beneath the fresh wounds, Kalanji noticed faint, unnatural scars. They weren't the ragged marks of a territorial fight or a clumsy encounter with a snare. These were precise, almost surgical, like old, deliberately inflicted wounds. A cold, hard knot of rage tightened in Kalanji's chest. This wasn't random pollution. This wasn't an accident of nature or a careless discard. This was targeted, insidious. It was an act of calculated cruelty, a deliberate weapon disguised as litter. The implications sent a chill colder than the river water through him. The lion, though still unsteady, managed to push itself up. It turned its gaze not to its waiting pride, but back to Kalanji. Slowly, deliberately, it dipped its head again, a second, more profound bow of acknowledgement. It was a conscious act, a gesture that transcended mere animal behavior, reaching into something primal and shared. Suddenly, a dull rumble beneath Kalanji's feet. The sandbar, undermined by the relentless current, began to visibly crumble, the edges dissolving into the muddy torrent. The river was rising, threatening to swallow them whole to reclaim its victims. Across the bank, the matriarch, her scarred muzzle lifted to the sky, let out a different kind of call. It was pointed, insistent, unlike any Kalanji had heard before. It wasn't a roar of warning or an expression of grief, but a clear directive, guiding them towards a shallow bend downstream, a less violent crossing. She was telling them where to go. The rigid protocols, the rules that had governed his life, now felt entirely irrelevant, a distant, muffled echo in the face of this impossible bond. Kalanji looked at the young lion, its eyes still fixed on him, and whispered, "Let's get you home," as if to a fellow ranger, a trusted companion. Man and lion re-entered the raging current, the water instantly pulling at them with savage force. This time, the Mwamba Pride's calls were a continuous chorus, guiding their journey, their voices seeming to encompass Kalanji too, welcoming him into their collective. He gripped the lion's mane, one hand holding the rope that had secured his boat, the other clinging to the rough fur. A sudden, jarring impact, a massive log, a phantom in the churning brown water, slammed into Kalanji's hip, searing pain exploding through him. He gasped, his grip threatening to give way, but he held on, refusing to let the current claim him. The lion, sensing his struggle, let out a deep, guttural growl, not at Kalanji, but at the river, a fierce, protective sound that seemed to defy the very force of the water itself. Together they battled the current. Gasping, muscles screaming, Kalanji finally dragged himself and the young lion onto the muddy bank. The Zambezi's roar, though still potent, was a receding terror. Exhaustion was a heavy cloak, but a profound relief washed over him as the Mwamba Pride, a wall of golden fur and powerful sinew, immediately closed ranks around them, their presence both protective and awe-inspiring. The rescued lion collapsed, panting. A sleek lioness, her fur the color of warm honey, padded close. She nuzzled the young male's neck, a soft, reassuring gesture, then lifted her head and looked directly at Kalanji. There was no hostility in her amber gaze, only relief and a strange, deep acknowledgement that spoke volumes without a single sound. Then, the dominant male emerged, a magnificent creature with a mane as dark as a storm cloud, his immense form casting a shadow. He approached Kalanji, stopping mere inches away, his massive head level with Kalanji's chest. Kalanji felt a primal weight in that silence, not of judgment, but of profound measurement. He held his breath, expecting an attack, bracing himself. Instead, the dominant male slowly, deliberately, lowered his colossal head in a bow. One by one, the entire pride followed suit, their powerful forms dipping in unison. Kalanji's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of disbelief and wonder. He had been accepted, folded into their sacred circle. The matriarch, her unblinking gaze fixed on him, stepped forward. It wasn't the piercing stare of a predator assessing prey, but the deep, ancient scrutiny of an elder measuring an equal, an ancient spirit recognizing something kindred. Another lioness, scarred from battles untold, approached. She brushed her cheek against the rescued male, a touch of silent comfort, then shifted her attention to Kalanji, emitting a low, guttural sound. A chuff, the soft greeting of a lion. The young male chuffed in return, a soft invitation. Kalanji, his hand trembling slightly, tentatively raised it, open and unarmed. The lioness didn't flinch. She studied his palm, his face, before turning and rejoining her pride. A breathtaking, silent exchange of trust had just passed between them, a moment that would forever reshape Kalanji's understanding of the wild. The dominant male let out a sky-shaking roar, a sound that vibrated through Kalanji's very bones. It wasn't a warning nor a triumph over an enemy, but a powerful, resonant declaration. The pride echoed him, their collective roar affirming Kalanji's place among them, a part of their collective. Despite the pain throbbing in his hip and the isolation from his own kind, Kalanji knew he couldn't abandon the young lion. Its wounds, raw and deep, were too severe. It wouldn't survive without more aid. "We have to finish what we started," he murmured aloud, the words a fresh breach of every protocol he had sworn to uphold. Reaching into his utility belt for his first aid kit, Kalanji scanned the surrounding area, his ranger instincts kicking in even amidst the profound emotional turmoil. His eyes, trained to spot the slightest disturbance, caught something unusual. Faint, specific boot prints, unlike any rangers, were partially obscured by mud far off the usual game trails. They spoke of a presence that didn't belong, covert and deliberate. Nearby, he noticed unnatural divots in the earth, too uniform to be animal tracks, suggesting mechanical impact or careful placement. A chill of foreboding tightened its grip around him. He wasn't just caring for a lion anymore. He was becoming inextricably entangled in a much larger, darker mystery, a sinister pattern emerging from the shadows of the Zambezi Wilderness. Kalanji worked with meticulous care, his fingers deft as he cleaned and disinfected the young lion's deep wounds. His limited first aid supplies felt inadequate, but he did what he could. The lion impossibly endured, a deep rumble vibrating in its chest that was not a growl, but a low thrum of tolerance. At one point, as Kalanji cleaned a particularly nasty gash on its flank, the immense creature leaned into his arm, a gesture of astonishing trust that sent a wave of profound emotion through the ranger. The matriarch, a silent sentinel, approached. She inhaled deeply, taking in Kalanji's scent, a slow, deliberate act of primal assessment. Then, with a soft rasp of her tongue, she licked the wounded lion's brow. It was a silent approval, a maternal seal of care that seemed to extend to Kalanji himself, a profound acceptance of his role. Suddenly, the pride stirred. They broke their protective formation, creating a living corridor that stretched toward a higher ridge, a subtle but unmistakable invitation. The dominant male, turning his massive head, glanced back at Kalanji. The message was clear, unspoken yet undeniable. "Come." Pain still throbbed in Kalanji's hip, but he pushed through it, leaning against the lion's sturdy side for support. Escorted by the pride, a magnificent golden wave of guardians, they moved as one strange, ungainly creature across the uneven terrain. The lions moved with a silent grace, their power a palpable force around him. At the ridge crest, the vast savanna unfolded before them, stretching to the horizon under the brightening sky. It was a wild, untamed realm, ancient and indifferent to human concerns. a place ruled by these apex predators. Kalanji felt like an intruder, a stark contrast to the regal creatures surrounding him, yet he was also carried by their explicit, unspoken invitation. The pride formed a wide semicircle, framing Kalanji and the injured lion. The matriarch and the dominant male, at the center, fixed their gaze on him once more, a profound, silent weighing. Kalanji, without conscious thought, bowed his head, offering a deep, primal respect. A chorus of soft, rumbling acknowledgments resonated through the pride, accepting his reverence. As they settled on the high ground, the sun beginning to warm his chilled skin, Kalanji's eyes, ever scanning, caught a faint glint in the golden grass. It was near a fresh, subtly unnatural divot in the earth, too precise to be a mere animal disturbance. He reached down, brushing aside the blades of grass, and his fingers closed around something small, metallic. An embedded chip, not organic, not natural, a tracking device fragment or part of one. He'd seen similar components in specific industrial applications, never in the heart of the Zambezi Wilderness. The pieces slammed together in Kalanji's mind, the specific biopolymer from the net, designed for slow, insidious harm, the precise, almost surgical scarring on the lion's flank, the unusual boot prints he'd discovered by the river, and now the sophisticated tracking device fragment. This was no random act of pollution. This was evidence of a highly sophisticated, targeted operation. A cold dread seeped into his bones. Illicit wildlife tracking, environmental exploitation, poaching of a scale he couldn't yet comprehend. The realization hit hard, a physical blow. He wasn't just breaking protocol, risking his career. He had stumbled upon a clandestine operation orchestrated by powerful, unseen human forces. He was no longer just a ranger guarding animals. He was a witness, and quite possibly a target. The wounded lion, sensing Kalanji's stillness, nudged his boot and rested its head, its amber eyes finally closing in peaceful sleep. Kalanji looked down at the magnificent beast, and in that moment, he felt himself not as a mere guardian but truly one of the pride. This impossible sacred bond compelled him to act. He knew with an absolute certainty that superseded all rules that he had to investigate the source of this calculated destruction, even if it meant risking everything he had, even his life. His duty now extended far beyond the park boundaries, beyond the written law. All right, if you've been with us since the beginning, you know Kalanji's journey has defied every expectation, every rule. But what he's about to uncover isn't just surprising, it's truly terrifying. A conspiracy that puts not just wildlife, but Kalanji himself in immediate life-threatening danger. Don't miss a single beat of this escalating nightmare. Make sure to like this video, share it with anyone who cares about justice, and hit that subscribe button to stay on the trail of this chilling mystery. As the sun climbed higher, painting the savanna in hues of gold and amber, the Mwamba pride formed a living corridor, a moving wall of muscle and fur. They escorted Kalanji and the recovering young lion across the vast expanse, a shared path taken by man and beast. Kalanji was no longer just a ranger. He was under their protection, an extension of their own. The air vibrated with their unspoken guardianship. They came to a clearing, a natural amphitheater of tall grasses and scattered acacia trees. Here, the pride performed a ceremony that transcended anything Kalanji had ever witnessed. One by one, each magnificent creature, from the youngest cub to the dominant male, lowered their heads in a slow, deliberate bow before Kalanji and their recovering kin. It was a powerful, silent vow of recognition, a deep affirmation of their shared bond, a moment etched into Kalanji's soul. The wounded lion, now resting calmly, its breathing steady, seemed to embody a profound, ancient wisdom. Kalanji understood. This moment wasn't just for him. It was a message, meant for a world that had forgotten its place. A silent roar challenging humanity's careless dominion. As the pride gradually dispersed into the long grass, melting back into the landscape, Kalanji found himself alone in the quiet clearing. The chip fragment and the peculiar polymer from the net were still clutched in his hand, cold and alien. The weight of his discovery pressed down on him. He had to know more. His gaze fell upon the faint, unnatural boot prints he'd spotted earlier by the river, now leading away from the water's edge. He decided to follow. Cautiously, Kalanji tracked the prints, his movements low and deliberate, his senses on high alert. The trail led him away from the main Zambezi, deeper into the lesser-trodden areas of the reserve. Along the way, he found more discarded nets, partially degraded, yet identical to the one that had ensnared the lion. Each piece bore the same peculiar metallic flecked polymer composition, irrefutable evidence of a deliberate, systematic deployment. Further along, hidden amidst a dense thicket of thorny bushes, he discovered a makeshift camouflage camp. It was recently abandoned, the ashes in the fire pit still warm. This wasn't a poacher's camp. There were no crude traps, no signs of recent kills. Instead, it was too organized, too clean, with specialized tools for deploying the unique nets, and what appeared to be sophisticated biosampling equipment. A cold dread began to solidify in his gut. Then the chilling discovery. Inside a discarded sealed container, Kalanji found vials containing what appeared to be animal blood samples, each marked with cryptic coded identifiers. This confirmed his worst fears: targeted biomonitoring, potentially even genetic manipulation. Beside the vials lay a small, encrypted data drive, a digital key to whatever secrets this place held. The evidence painted a grim picture. This was a well-funded, technically advanced operation, far beyond the capabilities of local poachers or even a small-time criminal syndicate. This was an eco-crime investigation of immense scale, likely corporate or governmental, shrouded in layers of professional stealth. The gravity of his situation settled over Kalanji with an icy certainty. His interference, his very presence here, made him a direct threat to this powerful operation. He was in grave danger, alone and deep in enemy territory, surrounded by an unseen enemy. He felt the cold certainty of being watched, hunted even, by the invisible hand behind this clandestine enterprise. The true nature of the human-related danger was now terrifyingly clear. His bond with the lions, the memory of their bows and their shared journey, solidified his resolve. He could not turn back. He would not. He had to expose this, whatever the cost. With the encrypted drive and blood sample vials clutched tight, Kalanji began the grueling trek back to his patrol vehicle. The weight of the evidence in his hand was nothing compared to the chilling certainty in his gut. He was no longer a ranger on patrol. He was a target. Every rustle of the grass, every distant call of a bird was scrutinized, his senses screaming for any sign of pursuit. The faint, unnatural sound started subtly, a distant hum of an engine, too precise for typical park traffic. Then the indistinct murmur of human voices carried on the wind. They were tracking him. They knew he had been to the camp. Reaching his dusty Land Cruiser, Kalanji scrambled inside, his hands fumbling with the radio. He transmitted a coded distress signal, terse and urgent, outlining a significant incident without revealing too much detail. He knew he desperately needed backup, but the thought lingered, cold and unsettling. How deep did this reach? Could his own department be compromised? Just as the final crackle of his transmission faded, a sleek black SUV, utterly out of place in the Zambezi Wilderness, roared up the dirt track, cutting him off. Two stern-faced men, dressed in generic tactical uniforms that weren't standard Ranger issue, emerged. Their eyes were cold, professional, devoid of emotion. One stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "Confiscated materials, Ranger. Hand them over." Kalanji stared them down, defiance hardening his gaze. "You're operating illegally. I found evidence of a criminal operation." The man's lips twisted into a cold, humorless smile. "You've stumbled into something far bigger than you understand, Ranger. This is classified." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the vast savanna. "Certain corporate interests, conservation projects, they require extensive data collection, scientific advancements. These nets, the tracking chips, the biosamples you found, all part of a larger plan, a bioweapon, genetic modification, resource exploitation. You wouldn't want to get in the way of progress, would you?" His words, veiled yet chillingly explicit, confirmed Kalanji's darkest suspicions. This wasn't just a localized poaching ring. This was a sophisticated, high-stakes game of corporate greed or governmental overreach, using the guise of conservation to weaponize or exploit Africa's most precious resources. Just as the men began to move, closing in on his vehicle, a sound tore through the air, vibrating through the very earth. A distant, earth-shaking roar. Then another. The Mwamba Pride. A powerful warning call that unnerved even these cold professionals. It wasn't just a roar. It was a defiant declaration, a primal warning. The men, momentarily startled, froze. Their arrogance flickered, replaced by a flicker of unease. They knew this territory, and they knew the raw power behind that sound. It was the wilderness itself rising in defense. Kalonji seized the moment. He jammed the key into the ignition, the old diesel engine sputtering to life, and slammed his foot on the accelerator. With a screech of tires and a cloud of dust, he swerved around the black SUV, leaving the stunned men in his wake. He drove wildly, the Land Cruiser rattling over the uneven track, the roars of the Mwamba Pride echoing behind him, a chilling, powerful backdrop to his escape. He understood then the forces he was up against. Vast, ruthless, willing to sacrifice the wilderness for their agenda. He was no longer just a ranger. He was a soldier in a silent war for the soul of the Zambezi. Looking back at the retreating wilderness, a place he had sworn to protect, Kalonji knew he carried the truth of the Mwamba Pride, a sacred trust exchanged, a vow unspoken. His personal sacrifice had made him an unlikely guardian, now bound forever to expose this vast conspiracy and protect the wild heart of Africa, no matter the cost. The Zambezi, a river that once roared with the raw, untamed power of nature, now held secrets far more insidious, shrouded beneath its surface like the morning mist that drifted above it. Kalonji Mwansa, the seasoned ranger who defied every protocol to save a drowning lion, found himself drawn into a conflict far beyond his wildest imagination. His impossible act of compassion had forged an unbreakable bond with the Mwamba Pride, earning him their profound, unprecedented trust. But that trust also led him down a path of terrifying discovery. The sophisticated biopolymer nets, the precise, almost surgical scars, the hidden tracking chips, and the chilling blood samples, all pointed not to random pollution, but to a vast, meticulously orchestrated eco-crime. Corporate interests, veiled as conservation and scientific advancements, sought to exploit the very wilderness Kalonji had sworn to protect. He was no longer just a ranger. He was a witness, a target, battling an unseen enemy whose reach stretched far beyond the river's banks. As the black SUV vanished in his rearview mirror, the echoes of the Pride's defiant roars still thrumming in his chest, Kalonji knew his mission had only just begun. The river, which once wanted to pull its secrets under, now mirrored the depths of a human conspiracy. He carried the truth of the Mwamba Pride, a sacred vow to expose this calculated destruction and protect the wild heart of Africa, even if it meant becoming another secret the powerful would try to bury. The war for the Zambezi had begun. End words 247.